On the 21st of January 1910, a train leaving Montreal would fail to reach its destination. A catastrophic derailment into an icy river would lead to the death of the majority of its passengers. This is the Spanish River disaster. The Sioux Express, also known as the No. 7 train, was a regularly scheduled cross-country passenger train heading from Montreal, Canada to Minneapolis in the United States. The train arrangement consisted of one engine and 7 carriages. First and closest to the front engine was the mail and baggage car, then the express carriage, a second-class coach, a colonist car, first-class coach, dining coach, and finally a sleeper carriage at the rear. The train left Sudbury Station around 12 midday, travelling west across the wintry landscape to Nairn, reaching the small town around 1 p.m. This would be the last time the No. 7 train would be seen whole. Travelling 5 miles further west, the train approached the Spanish River. Being winter, the river had frozen over with an ice sheet a foot thick. An iron bridge, spanning the 80-metre river length, was the crossing point. The train neared the bridge at speed as it curved through the hillside. An account by William Dundas, a mail clerk on the first carriage, said, "Nothing unusual was noticed until we reached the bridge at Spanish River. When about half a train length from the bridge, I felt the train pulling in a very rugged manner behind, and I know that a portion of the train behind was off the track. For a distance, the train pulled on. Then I felt the air brakes applied." The train continued lurching over the bridge, nearing the eastern side. The engine reached the end and off the bridge. Then, the next carriage, the mail and baggage, made it to safety. After that, the second carriage in tow, the express carriage, made it across. But there would be no third to make it to safety. The connection between the second carriage and the third had disconnected by force on the approach. But the momentum still drove the remaining 5 carriages over the bridge. In an instant, the second-class car, now leading the front of the row carriages, jumped the track, turning on its side, ramming itself clean into the structure of the iron bridge. The force of the impact broke the coach in two. So great the momentum, it looked as if a knife had cleaved it down the middle. One half sat strewn across the bridge, immediately bursting into flames, a result of the oil stoves used for heating the coach. The other half of the carriage fell into the icy river below. The carriage was densely packed with passengers, many perishing upon the impact. For those that survived the crash, they were now doomed in the fiery blaze or to drown in the freezing water, unable to escape. The burning metal wreck lay across the track, blocking it for the remaining 4 carriages as they hurtled forward. This set off a disastrous chain reaction. The next 2 carriages, the colonist car and first-class coach, hit the blockade and also jumped the track. Still attached to the fallen half of the second-class coach, these 2 carriages were pulled down into the water. The carriages hit the foot-thick ice, cutting it like a knife, as both carriages became fully submerged in the bone-chilling water. The way the cars had cut clean into the ice made it so that if anyone were able to escape through a broken window, they would have still been trapped under the icy top. Of the estimated 50 passengers, only a handful survived. Whether by impact, drowning, or exposure, they tragically passed. The next carriage, and second from the back, was the dining car. At the time, with an estimated 14 people inside, it too was pulled off the bridge into the icy water below. Now, closer to the river's edge, it fell into shallower water, not completely submerging, instead tilted on its side with the kitchen end of the car remaining above the water. The last remaining carriage was the sleeper carriage. Due to the length of the bridge, it did not fall into the water below, instead rolling onto its side down the embankment of the bridge's eastern point. As it rolled, nearly all occupants were injured, but none were fatal. Although the impact had been sudden, things were far from over for the initial survivors. In the partially submerged dining car, the train conductor, Thomas Reynolds, had been dining only moments before. He instructed the surviving passengers to hold on to hat racks and chandeliers to stay out of the encroaching water. Although bruised, battered, and with a severe cut to his head, he dove down into the freezing water, broke through a window, and emerged on the outside of the car. He scaled the roof of the carriage, using a ventilation shaft to pull out a young boy, with the prospect of other passengers being too big. With superhuman strength and assistance from inside, he tore a hole in the roof, allowing 8 passengers to escape. The male clerk, William Dundas, who jumped from the front of the train before the derailment, ran back to aid those in what remained of the second-class burning coach. He and others pulled screaming and terrified passengers to safety, trying to help with the litany of grievous and often fatal injuries. He recalls there being only a handful on their side of the bridge, unable to cross to the other side, blocked by the twisted metal horror on the bridge. The overturned carriage on the embankment became a makeshift hospital. The many injured were gathered there, tended to by the gallant efforts of survivors such as Helen Linnell, who had been travelling with her son but now tended to the wounded. She worked tirelessly for hours, stemming injuries with a little tin full of whiskey and strips torn from her cloth. A brakeman, who had been on the carriage first to derail, had been miraculously thrown onto the ice, mercilessly spared a tragic fate. He and another survivor volunteered to trek 5 miles through the snow to the previously passed town of Nairn, where a telegraph office was located and a call to help was made. It was 5 hours before assistance arrived to the crash site by train. Doctors from Nairn and Sudbury came from the east, turning their service train into a mobile hospital and transport. By then, many previously injured had succumbed to their wounds or exposure to the unforgiving cold. Over 20 passengers were taken to hospital nearby in Sudbury, 38 miles away. Over the next few days, divers would collect the bodies from the submerged trains. Many still believed there was another 8th coach in the river, but this was soon disproved by travelogues. In the hospital, more passed as the injuries took their toll. Initial reports at the time put the mortalities at around 40 to 45, but later estimates grew. Of the 100 passengers and crew who boarded, it is believed only a third survived. An inquest was launched on instructions from the Attorney General. A jury was sworn in 5 days after the accident and taken to the scene of the wreck. Workers and cranes were still there, pulling the broken metal out of the river. By early February, they had made their verdict and recommendations. Whilst it was speculated the accident had been caused by a broken track, sudden braking and winter conditions, no official cause of the derailment was ever agreed upon. Recommendations were put forward by the jury, questioning the maintenance coverage of the track, the use of openings for escape, as well as the prospect of emergency tools, all efforts that could have prevented such a loss of life. The route continued to be used for another century, servicing industry instead of passenger services. The line eventually closed in 2020. The bridge remains there today, aside a roadway, rusting atop the river, a reminder of the lives lost on that tragic day in railway history.